Hello everyone, welcome back to my zoology class. Today also we're going to continue with evolution. Today we're going to focus mainly on three main topics. That is Darwinism, the second one is Hardy and Weinberg principle, like I told you last class, and then the last one is evolution of man. So today we're going to start with Darwinism. When you talk about Darwinism, it is basically a theory that was given by Charles Darwin for evolution, okay? So this was first started in 1809 to 1882. This is also called the theory of natural selection. Like last class, I talked to you about natural selection, right? When I talked to you about the moth that was found in England in the industrial era during the 19th century. So we are going to basically focus on what are the theories, what did Darwin say in order to prove that evolution did take place, okay? So this Darwinism was coined by Charles Darwin in his book, The Origin of Species by Natural Selection. I have given you a brief introduction to natural selection last class. And then what happened was that Charles Darwin, he went around and visited different types of places. He went in a ship called the Beagle, okay? And then he went to a place in South America where there were so many small islands located. These small islands were called the Galapagos Island, which is in South America. This spelling, I made a mistake, A-M-E-R-S-E-A. So in South America, what happened was that Charles Darwin went to all the various islands which were very close to each other and then observed the plants and animals. He particularly focused in a bird called the finches. They are also called as Darwin finches, okay? What he observed was that in all the different small islands, the finches had different beak shape. The shape of the beak of the bird was quite different. Some had a beak like the parrot, some had a beak which was very small and pointed, some had beaks which were very long. These finches had different type of beaks which was found according to the food that was available in the particular land. Like in case of one island, there were lots of fruits available. So the beaks were like those of the parrots, where they could easily hook the fruit and then eat it. In some cases, the beaks were like those of the woodpeckers and all, in order to have a very sharp beak, in order to go inside and get hold of the larva, okay, to eat. So what he observed was that even though they were finches and even though they were close to each other, they were totally different, okay? They were totally different in their beaks. So what he said was that, oh, this must have happened because of natural selection. So he made it into a theory and he explained it. So what is the explanation? What is basically the explanation? So we're going to talk about Darwin's explanation of natural selection because it is found in nature. The first one, he gave out a flow type of steps, okay? So in the first step, he explained by the heading overproduction. As you have heard, you know that the virus, in case of virus, bacteria, and all, they multiply and replicate rapidly, right? But in case of take the example of birds, they are seasonal. But in case of human, they take around 9 months to produce an offspring. So what happened was that in case of overproduction, what Darwin said was that all living beings have an inherent tendency to produce offsprings in large number for the perpetuation of their race. That means in order to multiply their race, they are producing in large number as far as possible. As far as they are fertile, they started producing in large number in case of organisms. So what Darwin said was that initially the organisms, they started producing in large number. When they started producing in large number, they came to the second, he explained the second step, that is, there was limited space and food. As we explained in the first point, there was overproduction. So what will happen is that you should always know that space and food is always constant. It cannot keep on increasing, okay? It has a limit. So when a living organism keeps on multiplying and the space in the food remains constant, then obviously what will happen is that it says space in the universe is constant. It's regarding Earth also. So the ultimate source of food for plants and animals also remain constant. That's what he said. So what will happen? The carrying capacity of the environment does not allow the population to grow indefinitely. What do you mean by that? That means the Earth, let's say the Earth, it will give a maximum amount of space. Let's say in a particular area, in a particular town, you can occupy only a certain area of place to build your houses. Beyond that, you will not be allowed to build. So nature also, they give only a specific amount of space and food. So they will be restricted. That is what they are saying. So if there is a restriction, it will come to the third step, that is called struggle for existence between the organisms. Why is there a struggle? Obviously, there's a limited space and food. So what will happen? There will be struggle for space, air, food, water, and light. When you talk about light, you're talking about plants, remember that. So the struggle between the organisms of plants and animals is there. When there is a struggle, what will happen? Between the various organisms and plants, they will start fighting with each other. When they start fighting with each other, they are the struggles of different types, 3 types. The first one is intraspecific struggle. When you talk about intraspecific struggle, it is the struggle between individuals of the same species. That means you are struggling between human to human, or you are struggling when the dogs are struggling among the dogs in order to get food. Okay, so that is among the same species, there will be a struggle. The next one is interspecific struggle, that is individuals of different species. It can be done in the form of, it can be shown in the form of predator and prey, where the lion will eat, let's say the lion eats the prey, that is the deer, right? So the deer's population decreases. So in a certain way, it is regulating it. That is the struggle in the interspecific struggle. The last one is struggle with the environment. Besides the living organisms that is surrounding you, you're going to struggle with the non-living component of the earth. That comes under the environment. The struggle for environment comes under change of environment like heat, extreme heat in hot places, cold, extreme cold. You know that in very cold places you will find less population, less amount of living organisms, that is less populated. Drought, that is when there is less water. Flood and famine, etc., which will be a contributing factor for existence. So that means the living organisms, they are starting to struggle. Okay. When the living organisms are starting to struggle, it comes to the next step called variations. Variations means it's kind of like variety, in which it says useful variations have selective advantage. The everlasting competitions among the organisms have compelled them to change in accordance with the conditions to utilize the natural resources and survive successfully. What do you mean by that? Let's take the example of variations in certain animals, where there are certain animals which cannot run fast. Like in case of a deer, among the group of deers, there will be certain deers which will not be able to run fast and which are not alert. So what will happen is that they will be the one which will be the prey. Okay, so that means what will happen is that they will be the one which will die. So only the useful variations, like in case of the deer, the useful variations of being alert and being active and being able to run fast, that will be the variations which will be taken up by the environment, okay, which will be taken into consideration, and only that group of deer will be able to survive and reproduce. That's what it is going into. The next step called natural selection and survival of the fittest. You have always heard of survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. So this was actually a phrase that was termed by Wallace, okay, W-A-L-L-A-C. So natural selection, you obviously know, was given by Darwin, and then survival of the fittest also comes under the next step, that is the 5th step. In this case, what happened was that the variations, the useful variations will all get accumulated in an organism at a species. So what will happen? In this case, nature selects or favors only those individuals which have more favorable variations, that means characteristics, and are best adapted to the environment. Let's take the example of, let's say, certain plants that are found in the desert area. You will find that the plants that are able to prevent the loss of transpiration will be able to survive more than the plants that does not prevent the loss of transpiration. That comes under variation. So only those plants that are able to survive the loss of transpiration will come under the natural selection, where nature will select that particular plant. Remember that. The next example is long-necked giraffe. You have heard of this example a lot of times in class 9 and 10, where it says that long time back, they say that there was only short-necked giraffes, okay? The necks were very short. So what happened was that as the necks was very short, long time back, there was lots of trees and shrubs and all available. But as you know, in due course of time, obviously you have heard about deforestation and all. So in the same way, in due course of time, what will happen was that the leaves that was available to the giraffe, it was at a very short distance. But as evolution takes place, as time went by, what happened was that there was very less amount of leaves that was found at the base. So the leaves and all became higher and higher, okay, because it was eaten up by the giraffe. As it was eaten up by the giraffe, the height of the leaves went up and up. As it went up, what happened was that the giraffes were not able to get hold of the leaves in order to eat it. So among them, there were some giraffe which tried to strain its neck, and then slowly, in due course of time, because of reproduction, and as they went through the generation, what they said was that giraffe, in order to get hold of the leaves from the high-end trees, they started, elongating their neck. That is one of the example under natural selection, which we do not have a definite scientific proof, okay? So the sixth step is after natural selection, that is after the variations, the characteristics was selected by nature, the sixth step was inheritance of useful variations, okay? That means all the characters were taken, but now nature will select only those characters which are good for the environment and which is beneficial. That means survived individuals gave their variation to their offspring. So what do you mean by that? That means a group of offspring, after getting the characteristic, like it can swim in water. Let's say, I'm just giving an example. It can swim in water, the organism. So that characteristic will be given to the next generation. Another one of the parents will be able to have, it can survive in hot places. So that another parent will give the character to the next one. So only the useful variations are given to the next generation. So if one characteristic is given by one parent and the second characteristic is given by another parent, useful characteristics, useful variation, they will keep on combining together. The variations, the characteristics, they will keep on combining together, and in due course of time, what they're saying is that as they keep on having different variations and different characteristics, slowly it will start formation of new species. Remember that. In this case, in this formation of new species, what do they say? Variation keep on appearing, this variation, and accumulating, and after a number of generations of offspring, the offspring become markedly different, forming a new species. Remember that. That means at the end of the day, Darwin said that species are formed because of different characteristics. Basically species are formed because of all these 7 characteristics which go step by step in nature, as a result of which a new species are formed. Remember that. And when you talk about new species, it comes under evolution. Remember that. That is the most important thing that was said by Darwin, and it is also called the theory of natural selection. Okay, the next one that I'm going to talk about is Hardy-Weinberg. It's not seen, but Hardy-Weinberg principle. This Hardy-Weinberg principle is called Hardy-Weinberg's principle. It was given in 1908, okay? This 1908, this principle is like kind of like a statement, a theory, okay? Remember that. What did these two persons say? What did these two persons say? They said that according to this principle, the genetic variation in a population will remain constant. Genetic variation means it can be the variation of ability to withstand the heat, ability to produce food by the process of photosynthesis. I'm just giving an example. Will remain constant, that is the characteristics, from one generation to the next if they are not influenced by any evolutionary consequences or factor. That means the particular points which do not promote evolution. Okay, as long as it is there, that is, the relative frequencies of various alleles will remain constant in a species. The first thing that comes to your mind when you talk about alleles, you know that in a cell, it is composed of the nucleus, right? Inside the nucleus, there are chromosomes present. What is the genetic material of every cell? It is the chromosome. When you talk about chromosomes during cell division, which you have already studied in class 11, let's say during mitosis or meiosis, what happens is that the chromosomes do not form like a ribbon, but during cell division, in one of the stages, the chromosomes also form this stage, right? So what will happen is that in this stage, the chromosomes, they are composed of every locus. These are called, every junction, they are called as locus, okay? This point, every point, they have got alleles. Remember that. And they are called alleles. They are found in pairs. Why are they found in pairs? They are found in pairs because we are a diploid organism. Diploid organism means we take the chromosome from the father as well as the mother. That's why we come under the diploid organism. So when you define allele, it is a variant form of a gene which are located on the same genetic locus of a chromosome. That means they are located on the same genetic locus, and always remember they occur in pair together. Okay, because we are a diploid organism. So we are going to basically focus on the locus, the chromosomes, where the genes are located. These genes occur in pairs, remember that. So what happens is that the genes that occur in pairs, they will remain constant, okay? Like in case of us human, we did not keep on evolving at such a fast rate, right? We remain human. We have been remaining human for such a long time. But in case of evolution of man, it explained about Hardy and Weinberg principle, okay? But right now, we're staying as human for a long time, millions of years. That is because of the Hardy-Weinberg principle, which states that all the genes will remain constant unless and until there are evolutionary factors, unless there are characteristics which will tell you to change your body or change your genes. Remember that, okay? First, there's a change in the gene. When there is a change in the gene, there will be change in the characteristics of your body, okay, which will lead to evolution. So what they're saying is that there is a specific formula for that. In case of Hardy-Weinberg principle, the gene frequency of a gene is indicated as capital A, which is taken as a symbol small p. The gene frequency of its allele is taken as small a, which is indicated with Q. So the sum of these alleles P plus Q is equal to 1. So you need to memorize this equation. Genotype frequency of big A to big A is big A and small a, and to small a genotype is P square plus 2PQ plus Q square is equal to 1. This is the formula which you have to memorize. What they are saying is that, your textbook is saying is that as long as this equation remains constant, then evolution will not take place, okay? Then the genes will not change. When there's a change in the gene, there is a change in the genetic information of your body. When there's a change in the genetic information of your body like characteristics of tallness, shortness, characteristic of fairness, darkness, everything will start changing. So now we're going to focus on these Hardy-Weinberg evolutionary factors. What are the factors which affect Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium? The first one is genetic variation in a population. When you talk about genes, the first thing that comes to your mind should be, what is it? DNA, right? So the genetic variation in a population means there variability in a population. It can be seen in the form of gene mutation. When the gene mutates, what do you mean by mutates? That means in this case, what happened is that, as you all know, a DNA is composed of how many bases? 9, guanine, thymine, cytosine. Adenine and guanine comes under purine base. Thymine and cytosine come under pyrimidine base. So what they are saying is that these bases are the basic constituents of a gene. Remember that. So when these bases changes, then it leads to gene mutation. Okay, remember that. The next one is if there is a mutation in your chromosomes. Like we already talked about chromosomes. So what happened is that in case of chromosomal mutation, if one part of the chromosome is removed, in this case, if one part of the chromosome is removed, then this specific part which carry the characteristics will be removed from the organism, which will lead to a change in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. The next example is duplication. Duplication means, suppose the same characteristics is further added here. The bases are further added, that is the gene bases are further added. Then it leads to duplication, which will obviously lead to a change in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Inversion, you know, the chromosomes get inverted. The next one is translocation. As you all know, in case of cell division, there is exchange of, you talk about a particular word called, there is exchange of non-homologous sister chromatids between non-homologous chromosomes, which are not similar to each other. So if they are not similar to each other, they exchange part of it. Okay, they exchange part of their chromosomes, and then lead to a change in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium that comes under translocation. The next one is recombination. Recombination means obviously the combination of the genes. The next one is change in chromosome number. The chromosome number, a chromosome number may be a 1, it may be 2, 3 or 4. So if there is a change in the chromosome number, obviously there will be a change in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. That is what it is saying. Remember that. The next factor is reproductive isolation. In this case, what it is written is that mechanism which reduce chance of interbreeding among groups of the same species. Let's say, suppose you take a particular breed of dog. Okay, you take a particular breed of dog that is found only in a particular place. Like let's say from India, you take a unique breed of dog, and then you take it to let's say you take it to an island. Let's say. Among all the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, let's say you take it to one particular island, and then you let it thrive, you reproduce. In hundreds of years, you will see that they will have different characteristics in which they will be able to survive that particular island. That is called reproductive isolation, where the genes are isolated from the normal group of let's say the species. Okay, this leads to a change in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. The third one is genetic drift. Genetic drift is a very easy example. Let's say you have put in a bottle. Let's say you have put few colored marbles. So the black one. So when you take it out, when you take out the marbles, when you take out the marbles, there is no guarantee that it will be all white or it will be all black, right? So this effect is based on that. In this case, they say that the sudden and random change in the allele frequency occurring in small population by chance alone are called genetic drift or Sewall-Wright effect. This was the scientist who first talked about the effect, okay, which says that there is no guarantee that important useful variations will definitely come out. There is no guarantee that useful variation. Let's say the black marbles are the ones who are carrying the useful variations, the characteristics, okay? The useful characteristics in order to let an organism survive in the environment. So what he is saying is that there is no guarantee that only the useful characteristics will come out. That was given by Seward Wright. So if there is no guarantee, then it leads to a effect in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. That's what it is saying. The fourth one is when there is a change in the natural selection in large population, then there will be a change in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. In this case, natural selection in large population, what it is saying is that those organisms with genes or gene combination best adapted to the environment reproduce at a higher rate and contribute to the gene pool. We have talked about natural selection, right? In this case, the fourth one, the most common example is I talked about the moth, Biston betullaria and Biston carbonaria last class, right? So it is mainly focused on that natural selection in large population, where the nature itself select the best organisms suited for the environment. In case of another example that I can give you is about, you have heard of insect resistant to pesticides, right? In case of certain pesticides, in case of certain insects, what happened was that they were continuously exposed to pesticides like DDT and all. So what happened was that in due course of time, as they started reproducing and producing offspring generations after generations, they slowly became resistant to DDT. Okay, that comes under natural selection, where nature itself is selecting the insect which is more resistant to DDT. That's the reason why these days you talk about insects resistant to pesticides, right? This all comes under the example of natural selection in large population. Remember that. So basically, these are the main factors that will affect the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. Unless the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is affected, there will be no evolution or no changes happening. That it is what it is saying. So that means unless this equation changes, there will be no evolution. That's the reason why we do not see a rapid, very fast evolution, be it the living organism, be it humans also. This is because of this equation, okay? Now, the third one that we are going to focus on is, okay, it's evolution of man. The third one is evolution of man. That is the present human, okay? So in this case, the evolution of man was first taught by T.H. Huxley. T.H. Huxley first talked about the evolution of man in his book, about the origin of man in his book, Man's Place in Nature. He talked about how man got evolved. Basically, long time back, you talk about how we came from the ancestors where our ancestors were like apes, chimpanzees, and gorillas and all, right? So now we are going to focus on how they changed from, how evolution took place from gorillas, chimpanzees, man, to apes to man. Okay, another book was given by Charles Darwin in which he wrote about the descent of man. So these two books are the main books that contributed to knowing about the evolution of man. So there are different types of theories. Basically, some of the scientists say that man originated only in a particular place, that is Africa. Why? Because most of the fossils remains of the ancestors of man was found in Africa. That's the reason why they focus mainly on Africa. But what they found out was that in some places of Asia and China and all, in Germany also, they found fossil remains of ancestors of man. So they took into consideration everything, and then they put it stepwise into the early modern man. Remember that. So when man first came into this world, it was about 15 million years ago. Remember that no matter whatever the consequence may be, the branching of organisms, they say that ape and man had a common ancestor. Always remember that. That is what they say according to the scientific proof. So, how do we study human evolution? They studied human evolution by looking at the various epochs, eras, and the periods. Remember that they were of different types. The first one is prior to ape man. Okay, that's the first one, that is called prior to ape man. Prior to ape man, there were different types of species. They are called Dryopithecus. Dryopithecus was found in the rocks of Miocene. Okay, from Africa and Asia. So when you talk about Miocene, what is Miocene? That's the first thing that will come to your mind, right? So in case of this, what I want you to know is that the earth, okay, it is divided into era. In case we're going to focus mainly on the Cainozoic era. Cainozoic era. The era is further divided into period. That is, in case of man, you're going to focus on tertiary period. Tertiary period, and then in this case the period is further divided into Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, Paleocene, and Pleistocene. Okay, so we're going to focus on that. So the main heading in case of human evolution is they are of three types. So I'm going to focus on mainly the basic points of the three types. The first one is prior to ape man. They are of Dryopithecus. What happened in case of these fossils was that they resembled the great ape, the big one, where the hands and the legs were of equal length. Okay. The second one is proconsul, that was found in the rocks of Miocene in East Africa. They had a forehead like man, okay, remember that, but they had canines which was very pointed, remember that. These were believed to be ancestors of chimpanzee and gorilla. The next one was Ramapithecus. This was found in Africa and Asia. In Ramapithecus, they had short face and small brain. But the main characteristics was that they could walk erect. They were not walking on all four legs and hands. The third one is, after this came the ape man. In case of ape man, they were like apes, okay? They were the basic point where human and ape, they separated. They are of Australopithecus, Homo habilis, and Homo erectus. And then the last one is the early human. The early human are Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens fossilis. Remember that, okay? So, in the next class, we'll talk about the ape man and the early human. We'll focus on these two, and then I will try to wind up your chapter, and then we'll go to the next chapter. But remember that prior to ape man was the period, after that was the ape man, after that was the early human, which led to the modern man. So we're going to focus on the ape man and the early human next class, okay? So that will be all for today's class, and then next class I'll talk to you about these two topics, and then I'll try to finish the class, and then we'll start a new chapter. That is, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's human health and diseases. So see you next class.